The year was 1977, and along with other early Jesus movement pioneers, Bob and Jane Farrell set out to share their music with anyone and everyone who would hear. Little did they know the journey ahead would last over 2 decades for the husband and wife duo known as Farrell and Farrell. And through their music and ministry, they would help shape both the early sound and style of contemporary Christian music. Their influence not only affected many of the artists of the 70s and 80s, but can still be felt today. This is the Bob Farrell Interview, and it starts in 5, 4... You have found the CCM LegacyCAST. My name is Chris Gaines. I'm so glad you're here. If this is your first time, please like and subscribe. Punch that like button. That really helps the algorithm. And I'm ready to bring on my partner in crime, Scott Galden. Scott, how in the world are you today?
I'm doing great, Chris. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man.
I understand that you were recognized as a famous person this last weekend.
Well,
I was really kind of impressed by it, by the way.
Okay, so it wasn't that big a deal. John Schlitt and the great guys, Bob Hartman and guys from Petra, came through night before last, and they're doing their 50th anniversary tour, and Jennifer and I got a chance to go. And yeah, we were milling around, and some guy from the other side of the room goes, "Hey, you're that podcast guy, right?" I just looked past me and I thought, who's he talking about? So he said he'd been listening to our show and loved, whatever.
Okay.
So today's guest, Bob Farrell, is many things. He's an artist. He's a composer. He's an author. I can't wait to talk about that. But Absolutely. This guy is so amazing. He's the true Renaissance man. He's written a rock opera. So I'm hoping I get to that point someday. But my question for you, Scott, is when someone writes a rock opera about your life, who do you want them to get to play yourself when it hits Broadway?
Well, there's really only one person I know of that could pull this off. Now, the problem is I was thinking Pee Wee Herman. I was thinking, if Brad Pitt can sing, I think he can play me on stage, okay? But that's if he can sing. I don't know. I don't know. Well,
I tell you what, I
takes good looks and talent.
I'm going to let a trained veteran go with that. Bob Farrell.
I was thinking Pee Wee Herman, too, when you took the word out of it.
See?
No longer with it.
It's confirmation. Man. Two or more brothers are in agreement. It's biblical. You heard it.
Yeah.
Bob Farrell, welcome so much to our podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
I'm glad to be here. I've heard wonderful things about you guys, so you come highly recommended, so I didn't have any problem saying, okay. I will do it.
Plus, you were free on Monday afternoon, so that made it even easier.
Got nothing else going, man. Well, Scott, let me let you get things rolling. I've got a ton of questions to go.
Bob, I already know that you've got a fascinating story to tell about your childhood. What was childhood like for you?
I was kind of the clown. I was the smart mouth. I was likable, affable, and I was the big joker, kidder. So, and I had girlfriends from the first grade. So I was all that stuff. But I wasn't really a hungry musician in those grade school years. I really wasn't. I mean, my brother got a guitar and I started noodling some, and I did. I don't know. I figured out how to play taps on the guitar. I think I played that from my fifth grade class at some point. But it wasn't until junior high and between my seventh and eighth grade, we moved from Lubbock, where I was raised, Lubbock, Texas, West Texas Plains, to Dallas.
Okay.
And it was pretty good timing because the British invasion was about to happen, and Dallas, all those British bands wanted to come to America, and they all came to Dallas, including the Beatles. So I saw the Beatles and the Stones and the Kinks and you name it, man. Really, seriously, I saw really hot groups like the Stones in little bitty ballrooms. You know,
Wow.
And yeah, it was a real schooling. But I had a love for music. My mom, early on, she'd take me to hear the symphony and we played all kinds of music in the house. And my mom and dad didn't play anything. And my brother played French horn in band. My sister played flute, and I picked up the trumpet. somewhere around 6th or 7th grade. And I held on to I was kind of the same thing that happened to Paul McCartney. His dad gave him a trumpet, and he started playing. And then when he just, and then he got hooked on Buddy Holly and all those bands, that influenced the Beatles, and he switched over to guitar. Well, that's what happened to me. And McCartney and the Beatles did that to me. But it's really a quirky little thing, guys. I grew up in Lubbock, and I wasn't old enough to come around with him, but Buddy Holly was my neighbor.
Wow.
Buddy Holly, he lived across the alley and down a ways. That's the way the streets were laid out in Lubbock.
Yeah. It's a perfect square. Lubbock is a great little town.
I'd ride my little bicycle down the alley, and I would pull up when I would hear some strange noises coming out of a detached garage right there. And sure enough, it was Buddy Holly birthing rock and roll.
Wow.
Right there. So I would kind of, with my finger in my nose, sit there and listen to Buddy for a little while. But that move to Dallas was kind of a two-edged sword. I lost a lot of friends, and all of a sudden it was like, eh. And then once I got, some music into the scene, and I began to play in little bands, little cover bands, playing, a battle of the bands at the roller rink, or house parties, swim parties or whatever, and we would play beach songs and car songs.
Yeah.
Go Little Honda and all that stuff. But when the Beatles came out, it really just derailed me, and I never have gotten over it. I mean, I'm wearing a Beatles shirt right now. And
no kidding.
Up there on the ceiling of the Beatles.
Oh, wow.
In downstairs condo. Yeah, it's not that I agreed with all their philosophy and politics, but I did derail on their music. I've just always been a Beatle nut. And so I kind of cut my teeth learning how to play guitar by listening to Paul McCartney licks on the bass.
Right.
And I just ate them on the guitar. I finally talked my dad into giving me a guitar, and I was already in high school by then. I was in like 10th grade. And I started picking out stuff, on my own, just teaching myself guitar.
Yes.
And that's kind of how I continued on through high school. But when I moved back to Lubbock. Wow, who's that? That's Michael Demas.
There's your Beatlemania. There you go, I guess.
Jane and Bob and Michael Demas. And Demas was in my Farrell and Farrell band on the road. And he wrote a lot of songs with me. He still does. Yeah. He still lives in Nashville, and we get along great. Looking back at Bob. See, he's got his Beatles shirt on. Look at him.
I know.
That's crazy. Y'all were going to the film, right? There you go.
We went. We went to see 8 days a week. It was lovely.
That's awesome. Okay.
So you moved back to Lubbock.
Yeah, I moved back to Lubbock in my junior year, in the middle of my school year. I left that lifestyle behind, of starting to play in bands, and so I made up my mind I was going to get a band going. So I did. I started looking around, poking around, and started getting some guys pulled together. By the senior year, in the spring, I had some guys. And we'd learned 2 or 3 songs. We learned Dirty Water by the Standells, and we learned We Got to Get Out of This Place by the Animals, and, 3 or 4 things that I was supposed to do in a school assembly. And lo and behold, the woman who became my wife, Jane Robinson, walked into this meeting for the school assembly, and she had rollers on her hair about as big as fruit juice cans. And that's the first time I saw her. But she ended up everybody said, well, Jane's back in town and we've got to get her in the assembly. So we did. They did. And I backed her up. And that's how we met. We met singing. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's kind of romantic. And we fell in love. And, that romance continued on into college. And Jane went off to Boston. She became an American Airlines stewardess. And my band got going, and we started playing a lot of college and got real popular real quick in Lubbock and all over the plains. Frat dances, beer keg dances, and proms and that kind of thing. So I kind of cut my teeth performing what I would later pick up a lot of stuff from performing, just those gigs where I ran around Texas.
Wow.
And that was all in the late 60s.
Right.
We got married in 69. Jane and I did. She came back home and married the boy next door. And we didn't want to stay in Lubbock. We decided and I had kind of made a decision in my head that after a couple of years that band thing I had, to go looking for some management and trying to go to the next level if there was one. So I went to Houston because Bubble Puppy and Moving Sidewalk, which became ZZ Top, they had a manager.
Yep.
And I'd kind of done some research about it. I thought maybe I can hook up with that guy. Well, I didn't. I got to Houston and I was going to night school at U of H and working 40 hours a week. So marriage kind of became tough and drudgery and bills and never having enough money and all that. And we got in trouble. Our marriage got in trouble really on. About that time, we had our first child.
Wow.
So right in the middle of 1971, early in 71, January, Jane came walking in the door one Sunday, and she'd been gone all day. And she came in and just looked right up, got up in my face and grilled, and she said, "Bobby, I'm going to live for Jesus." She'd been to a revival thing that morning. "Bobby, I'm going to live for Jesus." And I said, "Jane, I'm going to live in Dallas." So I just kind of what a smart mouth. I mean, what a smart mouth. Always was. And I did. I took off. I left school. I left the baby. I left Jane. I left my home. I quit school all in one. And it was because it just seemed like a dead end. And that was a kind of a last straw thing for me. When she said, "I'm going to live with Jesus," I thought, well, I'm not going to live with a religious zealot. So I went off to Dallas and I lived pretty libertine for about 2 months. Okay, kind of letting out my steam, and I got sick of it. I got tired of it, so I one day decided to go back home, kind of like the prodigal. I came to myself and I went home. I wanted to make the marriage work. I did not want to know anything about Jesus Christ. I didn't, and I didn't have a background of religion of any kind. No mandatory church services and stuff. But when I got back home, Jane had a bunch of new Christian friends from this church that she was going through, First Baptist Houston downtown, and they were going through an extreme, off-the-chart revival. And the Jesus movement was starting to really, really go and peak and all that. I wouldn't say it peaked, but it was really growing. And it was newsy, a lot of people knew about the Jesus movement and Jesus people and Hog If You Love Jesus and all this stuff. And sure enough, about a week after I got back with my family, I was ready to bolt again. I was not loving it. It was like, and a guy came in my house on a Saturday afternoon and just, he had his guitar under his arm and he had an album under the other arm that they had made, and that turned out to be the leader of the group that was singing the morning Jane got saved.
Wow.
At First Baptist Houston. And they had cooked this up behind my back, and I didn't know it. So, after about 15 or 20 minutes sitting with this guy, and the girls had disappeared, the two girls that were there, my wife being one of them, I figured him out, and I went, man, they're going to bug me until I just fry one of these people. So I just really leaned on this guy. And, he just did the right thing. He just when I had a real, serious question about all of it, he would just kind of go, man, I'm not sure, but I do know this. And he would just bring me back to the gospel and why Jesus came in the first place and all that. And, after over a period of a couple of hours, my cathodes just melted.
Wow.
And I just came to Jesus. I finally just thought, I don't have any more arguments. I don't have any more smoke screen to throw up. I might as well throw in. And I really didn't know any more than that, guys. I didn't know what I was in for. I didn't know what it meant. I had nothing, no info, no data.
Wow.
And sure enough, it took. And man, my life just immediately that week started changing. I went up to Dallas. My brother and I had to go up and get some stuff out of my dad's garage that he wanted gone, leftovers. And I kept trying to tell my brother what happened to me. and the words just got this far and just stuck in my throat, and I couldn't get it out. And sure enough, I met up with my friend from Nam that was home from Nam, and we got high, and I kind of just fell back in my old thing with him. It's like he was my buddy growing up, and I had been in bands with him in the past. And so by late that night, I was kind of all high and buzzing and on everything, and decided to ask Jesus to leave me alone. I had just thought that, I prayed to receive him. Maybe I can ask him to leave now. And that didn't work. I got home the next day, and my wife was crestfallen. But on the other hand, there was a girlfriend of hers that she knew about this much more Bible than I did, but she knew about that story about Belshazzar that messed around with the thing, the stuff on the Lord's table and the handwriting on the wall thing and all that.
Yeah.
And when she got to the part when she said, you know what, he was messing with the things of the Lord, and just like that, God took him that night. And I was like, she just snapped her finger in my face. And it was a crystallizing moment for me, because I thought, man, I do not want to go that way. So she said, but Christians stumble. And that's what's happened here, Bob. You just stumbled really bad. So she led me in prayer and helped me get back to a good place and got restored. And, I went down that night and wrote my first Christian song.
Really?
That night. It's called Restored. Pat Terry Group did it a few years later.
Mm-hmm.
So the song is still out there, in a way. But it started a cycle, guys, that continues to this day, which is the way the experiences in my life just kind of drive the motivation to capture it and find a way to communicate it through music. And of course, at that time, I'd been away from doing very much music. I hadn't been in bands for a while. So I was missing it more than I thought. And truthfully, it just started, my new faith just started pouring out of me. I just started writing song after song. And it was innocent, but it was only as serious as it was. I mean, I wasn't trying to become a songwriter or, that's my new career or any of that. I just came in the side door.
Wow.
Of all that whole writing thing and publishing. And of course, it blew up over the years into everything. But our hearts were real ripe for ministry. And I really wanted to, Jane and I both felt a real affinity for sharing what was happening to us. And we kind of became the poster children of that revival at First Baptist Houston, because it kept going. It was cranking.
Wow.
And there was only one other group in Houston that Jane and I started singing at home with our roommate, Margot, who rented a room from us, because we were all new Christians. And so we just started doing a little trio thing. And then somebody said, come sing in a Bible study with us. Got a bunch of kids that got saved in that crusade, that your wife got saved in, and come sing. So we did, and literally probably two songs. One of them, I think, was from Jesus Christ Superstar. Really? Oh, good pick, Bob. But anyway, the phone started ringing, and it didn't quit ringing for several years. So the thing was, there was only one other group in Houston doing that, what they later called contemporary Christian. But at that time, they called it God rock and Jesus music, and and there's a group called the Blessed Hope, and they changed their name to the Hope of Glory later, I think, and they were on Tempo Records or something. But they were the only other group that was doing it, and in Houston. So we were pretty quick. We got pretty busy doing coffee houses and youth camps and yada yada yada, and so it just kind of snowballed. And about a year and a half after coming to the Lord and getting all this going on, and if we got up in front of a crowd, we kind of sing everything that I'd written until we sung all that, and then the next time maybe I'd have a new song. And that's kind of the way it started going and kept going. We moved to Fort Worth in the fall of 72. I did go back to school and got my degree.
Were you working? Did you have a side hustle or gig, or what were you? How are you providing for yourself?
I did. I worked doing photographic work for a publisher, a print publisher. Okay. And so I would work nights, and I started taking 18-hour semesters for 2 or 3 semesters in a row. And I kind of got my degree for my dad because I promised him I would get it, and I didn't feel good about quitting entirely. So I went back to school that fall of 71, and I got out and graduated in 72 summer. And I was working full time, so was Jane, and we had started running back and forth to Dallas from Houston. And we would go get up in the morning and take Jane, drop me. I'd go to school and I'd drop her off at work, and then to take Dawn, our daughter, to daycare, and and then when in the afternoon we would catch a Southwest flight from Hobby Airport to Dallas Love Field and go rushing off to the church and sing. And then as soon as he had everybody bow their head for prayer when he started to preach, we'd slip out the side door and run back to the airport and just start it all over again.
Oh my gosh. And pick your daughter up from daycare and start all over again. And oh my goodness.
Start over the next day. And so, Jane and I thought, maybe we should move to Fort Worth. So we did. And it just kind of blossomed from there,
Let me ask this: your early songs, how would you stylize those? How would you describe them stylistically?
That's a good question. I listened to so much Steppenwolf and Three Dog Night and Beatles, and those were all the people that that I cared about their music, and there was a real wide range of. I didn't know anything about gospel. I didn't have a clue about Christian music or gospel music or choir music, so I just the fertile bed that I was living in just came from those bands that I had listened to, and I continued listening to. I didn't just little by little I started listening to love song, and I started listening to that Jesus Everlasting Music concert thing that Maranatha Music put out about 72 or so. And I liked some of that music, but I have to say, guys, that all during our tenures, ministry, and recording artists and traveling and all that, I didn't listen to a lot of stuff. I loved DeGarmo and Key.
Yes.
And I met Eddie really early on, 73. We've known each other since 1973. And they kind of were, their innocence about getting started in the ministry was kind of similar to mine. He and Dana got born again, and they didn't know how they were going to pursue it. So they started they were writing some songs, and they wanted to sing them in churches, and they wouldn't have them in Memphis. So they started going to bars and started singing them there. And that was kind of the approach a lot with what Jane and I had early on. We had a group called One Man Band, One Man Jesus. And then we changed the name. Once we moved to Fort Worth, we hooked up with a keyboard player, and he was going to seminary too, and studying church music. And Bailey Dickerson and Bailey and Jane and we became Millennium, and then we added a drummer to the mix. And that group, and the first album that we did was Millennium songs, and some of them were mine and some were Bailey's, about half and half. He was from Ohio. And it was a good blend, and we had a great vocal blend, and we really had a heart for Jesus, for leading people to the Lord. And you have to understand, guys, I'm sure you know it, but that Jesus movement was Jesus moving. Mm-hmm. And you never knew exactly what form that was going to take, but our hearts were so driven by the outreach quality of that. So with one hand, you took hand with Jesus, and the other hand, you brought a friend. Mm-hmm. So that's the way it worked. And you're always, for us anyway, we're always seeking evangelistic opportunities. Yeah. And
that seems to be a theme in the early part of the Jesus music. It's very evangelistic. It was the draw. Which I guess it changed a little bit later on, but that the artists that we've talked to have talked about how important evangelism was when especially during those years of 70s and 80s.
It was everything.
Yeah.
And you talk to Tommy Coons and Chuck Girard, and you'll hear the same thing. You talk to Eddie, he'll tell you the same thing. When he and I wrote the rock opera, the reason was evangelistic. That's why we wrote it. Yeah. We didn't write it for sales. I think my motivation has been pretty pure, and I can say that with a straight face. I'm not just trying to put myself up here, but I'm just saying my motivation about why I do what I do and how I write what I write, and why songs like It's Crazy is Let the Whole World Know, or People in a Box, or Boundless Love. The reason that I've always been, and I've been able to spread out, I think, and do all these extended works like Hero the Rock Opera, because I kept a wide open canvas to paint on. And I didn't discount anything. I certainly couldn't write rap, but I love some hip hop, and I've done some of it. But
let's talk a little bit, because your music kind of ebbs and flows. It goes in a lot of different directions, because I know that you've got a period where you're.
When we first signed with Newpax, Bob McKenzie said, "Well, it's too eclectic. You need to settle on one." I said, "No." I used to fight with Bob McKenzie all the time, starting from day one. But he loved our music, and he was if you knew Bob Mac, he was a real mentor kind of a guy, and he was a very insightful man, and he took risks on people, and he loved Jane and my potential, and so he signed us, in 77, and I didn't have any. Yeah, there you go. The first album is not on. It was called Farrell and Farrell, and then the second album was Portrait. That's got the one where I'm in the hand. Yeah, there you go. There's the first album, and a lot of those songs got written just before that album took place, and that was recorded in Nashville, and we had a blast. It was a hoot for me, but I guess it was just because I was eclectic in my nature, and I still am. And I can turn around in the same morning and write something really throw down rock and roll, and then write a ballad in the afternoon, just no problem. And
as I was doing my research, it sounded like, it could go all the way from, something that I would hear the Carpenters do almost. I mean, I'm looking at these album covers, and that looks like it could be, straight out of the Carpenters. And then you take this move in the 80s into like a new wave type thing. And I think I'm listening to Thomas Dolby in the background. I mean, and just huge differences. I'm just curious, how did you, because most artists don't make that kind of thing.
I know.
How did you do that?
I'll tell you what it was, Scott. I got bored.
Yeah.
And it was what we were doing. It was kind of middle of the road pop, but also DeGarmo and I were, we communicated. I mean, he produced a live album, Let the Whole World Know, which is Dale, the one with that one. And he produced that album, and I knew him already, but he had never done anything like that with us. But that song, Let the Whole World Know, which one of my band members, Leonard Ahlstrom, that was later with the New Song, the band New Song, Leonard wrote it. And I heard it on the bus one morning while we were out traveling. And I said, dude, we got to learn that immediately. Like right now, we got to do that song. So we did, and we started performing, and people went nuts. So it kind of drove the ideas for that live album. And it's a good album. And there were 3 radio songs, big songs. But once we started doing Let the Whole World Know, it opens up something a little bit punk in my head. I thought, it's time to shift gears. It's time to really kind of shake people up. So Eddie was a real proponent of, and we both liked Hall & Oates. We liked Sheena Easton, all that techie stuff from the mid 80s. And we, in between the live album and Choices album, there was 2 years, and I was able to write. I mean, we had 20 songs picked for that record, good songs,
wow,
and we picked down to 10. And several of them I wrote with DeGarmo, and a couple of them I wrote with Mike Demas, who had, by that time had joined me playing keys and mostly guitar. But starting with the live album, he started, Make Me Ready album. In fact, the one before, the one there where I've got the sharp looking Gibb and Morris. Yeah,
there we go.
Sure, you look like the intro to Family Ties or something. I'm kind of
I wish you could have seen the original art for that cover because it was very cool, and I don't know why they picked over it, but it was a painting of John Charles Ogden, whoever that wrote the one that painted the one where the animals are standing in line going into the ark.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And you've seen it.
Yeah,
and
sure.
There's an artist in Nashville that painted that painting with Bob and Jane standing in line with the animals.
Wow. Okay, I got to find that somewhere. That's got to be out there somewhere.
Cool. And for some reason, somebody thought, it's going to look like a children's record or something, so they didn't use it. But it was really cool. But
I'm still trying to figure out what it's like going into a studio in Nashville in 1984 and saying, hey, I got this great idea for a Christian new wave album. I mean, that's just so groundbreaking. Well, it's hard for me to believe people are even ready for that. Or like there's a producer that can go, I've got I can catch your vision. You know,
that's why we went. The live album was recorded in Oklahoma City at the Civic Center, and Eddie produced. He was out in the sound truck, which was a trailer, and just recorded the live album. But the Choices album, it didn't get made in Nashville, and neither did Jump to Conclusions or Manifesto.
Was it L.A.?
And even Superpower, most of it got. Well, no, I'll take that back. But the first 3 Tech records from Choices to Jump to Conclusions to Manifesto were all recorded in Memphis.
Memphis.
Yeah. So all of that, and there was a different vibe, guys, than there was in Nashville. Nashville wasn't without. I mean, you know, I'd done all those other pop records in Nashville, and they're great, incredible musicians, but you really had to work sometimes to get them to get out there.
They had their little box. They had their box that they were working in, right?
If you let them get away with it, they would just kind of come in and do their dance, and their dance was incredible. I mean, they had a bag of tricks they could always pull from. So your tracks went fast, and they were good, and I'm not running them down, but I needed a fresh break, and I found it by going over there where Eddie and Dana lived and worked in the studio at Ardent where they had been recording since they were in junior high. They were actually made engineers, both of them, in junior high and high school. So Eddie, he and I kind of cooked up a thing, and I was his guinea pig because it was something he was wanting to do, and I went along. I was like, okay. So that's kind of how it happened. We got our ideas from really off the wall places, but we had written a song. The first 2 songs that Eddie and Dana and I wrote together were in the same day, in the same afternoon at Eddie's house. We wrote "Let the Whole World Sing" for DeGarmo Key, big song, huge song. Mm-hmm. And they wanted me to write with them, and that was the first time we wrote it. But they wanted, because I got on the radio a lot, and they didn't, and they needed something that was palatable for the Christian radio. And we wrote "Let the Whole World Sing" together, and they got on the radio big time. So they were always, pretty cool and pretty grateful about that happening. But we also, the same afternoon, wrote "Get Right or Get Left," and it was, when we wrote it, it was a show. You got to get right or get left. Well, it was a shuffle beat.
Which
was predictable. It was a good song, great lyric. I mean, there was nothing wrong with it. But Eddie and I were sitting in a restaurant one night when we started Choices album, and we knew we were going to cut that song on Farrell and Farrell, but we were listening to the music coming through the speaker up above.
Yeah.
And it was a Thomas Dolby song.
That's it. I'm telling you, I hear Thomas Dolby in that.
And Eddie was taking a bite, and he went, "Man." He was pointing up and feeling to the music. He said, "That's what we need to do to get right. Right there. We need to do something just as bizarre as that." Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Boom, 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 boom. So once we got with Carl Barsh, who was arranging every song, I worked with Carl for 3 or 4 albums after that, and he worked on the Hero of the Rock Opera. Carl was an arranger, keyboard player, composer, he played everything, and he was an incredible musician. And when we played what we wanted to do, he just kind of started doing that bass line, boom, boom, boom. Got to get right, I'm get left. So it fell in real quick to what we were wanting to do. And so kind of what happened on the Choices album is we just decided to get as far out there as we could dream.
So did I hear a little bit of Devo influence in that as well?
There's a little of all that. There's every song that Carl arranged was a chart that's, you can't see my hands because I'm on a small screen here, can you?
No.
The charts they're huge.
Wow.
3 and 4 and 5 pages.
Yeah.
And so every song that was on Choices had a model.
Yeah.
Of a pop song.
I can hear. Yeah.
Model. It would be a Sheena Easton hit, or it would be Thomas Dolby hit, but every song had a model that kind of for the genre that Carl put it in it for an arrangement, and that's what we went by. And so it was real. We took plenty of time doing it, and it was a breakthrough because the reason we were doing it was because nobody was doing tech in Christian music. None.
Yep.
Like none.
Right.
So, Eddie's whole thing was, Farrell, if you do this and you do it right, you'll have your own little piece of the pie, buddy. Mm-hmm. Nobody would be quite like Farrell and Farrell.
And I'd like to jump in at this point, give you a little colored commentary, Scott, as you were laying that out there, because I was living it. I was in the prime demographic, as it was coming along, and he's right. There was nothing there. And so it's so fascinating to hear that Eddie, whose name continues to come up, the more of these we record, Eddie's name comes up more and more. And I think it's amazing that you guys connected. I'm not going to say Lennon and McCartney, but I think Bob Farrell knows how to write a pop song. He knows how to write an AOR. He knows how to write radio airplay. And he's enough of an artist, a true artist, that he does paint outside the lines. This guy could have done anything he wanted to do. I wasn't familiar with Newpax. Is Newpax with Eddie? What was that label?
Newpax was a label that grew out of a company called Paragon. And Paragon was something that Bill Gaither formed. Okay. His manager was Bob McKenzie for his live shows back in the 70s and 80s. Right. And they formed it because Bill pulled in his own copyrights. And so it was to administer Gaither copyrights. And it did very, very quick after it became a company, it blew into a label because they met Don Francisco, and then they met Gary Paxton, and they married, and just boom, boom, boom. And I came along right in the midst of that mix of, of them going, man, I love your songs, Adoption and all those, Good Shepherd and all those things I wrote for that first album. They were just ding, 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 ding. And I was writing a lot of that stuff by myself, but later on I did more collaborating, especially after I moved to Nashville. But Eddie and I met in '73 at a crusade in Memphis, and it was a crusade being run by the guys that led me to the Lord, Bill Landers, the guy that was the head of the group Doug. First band they signed to Murr Records. Billy Ray Hunt signed Doug as the first band on Murr when they started it. They did school assemblies with this crusade thing they did. And they would go into an area and spend a whole week, sometimes 2 weeks, just doing school, junior highs, colleges, assembly programs. And those kids would come out at night and they were getting saved in the road. I mean, I'm not making any exaggerations. And so they were doing one in Memphis, and I wasn't in the band, and Eddie was certainly not in the band. He was just starting. They had their group called Christian Band, Before
that's pretty generic.
Man, that was the first name before D and Drummer and Key. But Eddie and I we met up there because we both wanted to be around the electricity, the ministry. It was so heady. All those times in the Jesus movement were so heady, and this was '73. And so we just drove the truck around and helped them set up their gear. That whole
so
2 weeks.
One of the things we like to talk about is how, and that's so awesome because so many of the amazing things that happened definitely happened because God happened, and you just wanted to. It was evangelistic, and hey, what do we got here? What do we got to work with? Let's put on a show. Let's do what we do, and these songs are coming to you, and therefore they're coming out, and creative people are connecting, and God's using all this. So as that happens, the industry begins happening. A golden age of CCM or Christian music comes up. So what, as that happens and you're writing and you've got a label and it's kind of a label, but not really a label. And then there's Star Song and what their vision was, which we talked about that with a couple of artists. What was your first album that charted that was, I mean, you had Boundless Love, you had Let the World Know. When did you guys start getting airplay? And then it became, you all are a group.
On the Farrell and Farrell record, the first release was Earthmaker, and it went to #1.
Earthmaker, okay.
So we had 2 or 3 #1 songs right off the bat, and people liked us, and it was palatable for them. We were kind of like the Carpenters. I mean, they had husband and wife duo, and yet we were singing stuff that was kind of hit, and like. So then I'd heard Brown Bannister's work on Amy, on her first record. And one time I was at church in Oklahoma, city where Jane and I were living, when we got signed by Newpax. We were living in Oklahoma, and one night at church, I was just thinking, man, I love that old man's God. Oh, we're living in a no man's rubble. Remember how good that was?
Yeah.
Man, how groovy some of those songs were on the Amy, first record. So I just went after church that night. I just found his number somehow, and I called him, and we talked for 2 hours. And I said, I love what you did, and he said, I love what you do. And I said, well, let's get in love together. And so that's what we did. I just called Brown cold and said, I want to meet with you, and I want to play you some songs. So we did, and we made the Portrait album out there at Chris Christian's studio, the Go Line, and we spent a lot of time doing it, and we co-wrote All You Need, which was a huge. That was a pop hit. They just didn't know what to do with it.
Right.
They had it break out on several pop stations around the country. All You Need is Jesus. It's not like it was, trying to be real cloaked. It was right up in your grill, right. And yet it popped up on pop stations, just bang, 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 and the label didn't have a clue. They didn't have a clue what to do.
So let's kind of come back to what Scott was talking about. At some point, you and Eddie are listening for this new sound. You're listening for, you're listening to what's on the radio. You're speaking the language of the listener as you're still evangelistic, both of you guys, and yet you're musicians, you're creators, and that was the language. And Scott, in that period, I don't know how in tune you were at that point to what was kind of going on in the bigger picture. When he says nothing, he means nothing. I mean, the guys that came after them that they influenced later, that was a little more new wave. This was before that. This would have been that 80s synth pop. The guys you're talking about, and we didn't have anything. And what was fascinating to me is what that did to their trajectory and how the record companies handled it well and poorly. I think there was a lot of different things of how to take them out to the masses to be heard. And one of the things I was curious about a little later, I want you to answer for me, what were of all these albums in this discography, which one were the most commercially successful? I tend to look back at some of them and I pick some of them and say, artistically, these are the best, and I'll have to find out which some of your favorites, but not necessarily what was commercial success.
Those 2 albums, First Choices in '84 and then Jump in '85 or '86. Early. Those were the most successful. I mean, we had them hooked in the nose, and we did it on 2 kind of levels. They let us be really zany on the one hand, and they loved those tender ballads, Ransom, Scars, No Need, all that stuff that I wrote, by myself and sang with my wife on the guitar. But it was an acoustic moment, and we did 2 or 3 of those every time we played. even with the band, even when we started rocking it out. I just wanted to I felt like we had already conquered and kind of worn out, for us anyway, that middle of the road pop that we were doing that was more Carpenter-ish. I felt like we had gone as far as we could take that. And Eddie and I, and Dana too, but especially Eddie and I, all of our writing, I mean, we get together this afternoon and it's like that. I mean, the writing comes so quick and we're on the same wavelength that we don't have any trouble telling the other guy that sucks. It just happens quick. It always has, and it still does. And so because of that, we had, Eddie was an A&R guy and a manager and a PR guy and a producer and he wore so many hats. And well, I mean, he can take the writer hat off and put on the producer hat or put on the exec hat. And he's always been able to do that. Not very few people can go there. Toby Mac can go there. Yeah. Toby Mac is real similar to that. But because of it, Eddie comes up with ideas, not just for his own band, but for other artists, and good ideas.
Yeah. So, Bob, here's a question I had about that. You were alluding to the fact that when you'd go to a concert, your music was so broad. And did you find it strange as you were kind of in those touring years and promoting the albums and stuff that you'd go to a concert and maybe someone had heard People in the Box and they were, their demographic was in their teens and they were wanting to rock out, and yet the parents were there. And did you have any kind of conflict from a stylistic style of how do you do a concert? Did you just go crazy with the techno and the rock, or how was that blend?
We kind of did both, and we found a way to do it, and the crowds allowed us to do that. Do you remember how the Imperials were? They had such a wide audience, and so was ours. I'd look out in the front row, and there'd be grandma and grandpa and all the grandkids. Sometimes you can just, go out there and burn their face off, and you don't want to do that. So you figure out a way to do it.
Well, I found this old picture. I thought this was fun. This was from our place, and y'all were a pleasure to come at our little place in Dallas, Fort Worth, and won't spend too much time on that. Yes, yeah. So we had some fun times. We did have some fun times, and they
tell what year it is by the coat I'm wearing. What year was that been, Chris?
You can pull that. Yeah, I mean, maybe 89.
That's very Don Johnson-ish, if you ask me. That looks very Don Johnson-ish. Yeah, that's late 80s.
A little Miami vibes going on.
Yeah.
Those were some really, really good times, and I just wanted to thank you personally for what you meant to us and all those. They always packed it out, and they had a great time. And his wife, love to have her on sometime. Please pass on our thoughts and our love. Y'all are just such an inspiration to so many people. You really, really are. It was just such a blessing to have that. And so let me just ask you real quick, as you guys kind of skyrocket in some of your peak years, you toured with a lot of people, you did a lot of events, I would imagine you probably opened for D&K some and a lot of different people. You toured with a lot of different people.
We did 2 years of touring together here and in Europe together. So sometimes I opened and sometimes they opened, but we kind of switched it off. And otherwise, we didn't do many gigs together. But we had the Euro-American tour in 86 and 7 or 85 and 6, something. Yeah. And we did a lot of shows. We did like 200 plus shows here and in Europe. And it was fun. It was a hood, in fact.
I want you, before we get off that, I want you to tell a little bit about this story about being in Europe and the fall of the wall, and that tour seemed like it was pretty special to you guys. Maybe just share that story a little bit about the impact of that tour. And
we had a heart for Slavic Europe, and I don't know exactly, but I wrote a song called "The Meek and the Mighty." It came from the title of a book, but it was about the history of the Slavic people, and they've always been under oppressive tyrants. And I wrote this song, and we put it on, which album is that on? Jump. It's on Jump. Mm-hmm. And it was because of the heart we had for those people. And we started traveling over Europe and sneaking in sometimes into the East because the wall was still up in probably 82 or 83. Yeah, that's in Russia. That's in Moscow. at that big ice hockey arena that we've seen on the old Olympic pictures, and that's Joe English playing drums with us.
I was going to ask. I did not know that Joe toured with you. Wow.
Well, it was that one run, and we were supposed to do 15 shows in Moscow and Leningrad, and we had an invitation from the Kremlin. It was because of a guy named Tom Newman. You probably know Tom from TBN Network. Okay. Yeah, and Tom, he had a group called Toymaker's Dream.
Oh yeah, and, yeah. Okay.
Toymaker was a production. We went over. He called and said, "You guys want to open?" And Mike, the guy on the far left in that picture, Demas, he wrote all the music to Toymaker that they used to perform it. So it was an all-in thing going on there. A lot of connections, and we were supposed to do 15 shows. We ended up doing almost 35 shows.
Oh wow!
Because it sold out, and people were spending a whole week's wage to come to see them, and it was pretty daggum cool to see. Well, you just felt like you knew you were tearing down the strongholds, and it felt that way. It felt like you were really doing some strong work for the Lord in that country, and with those people, and they were this close coming to the. I mean, a year later, the wall came down. So we were there at a point in time when they were really open. They were really just totally open to the gospel. And Tom was afraid that we would get in trouble with the officials if we said too much about Jesus. But obviously the songs were Farrell and Farrell, D&K. We did some Starship. We did some Mr. I mean, we kind of had a mixed bag for 45 minutes of opener. And about the second or third night, I told Tom Newman, I said, dude, they're not going to throw you out of here. They're not paying us. We're not getting paid. And we're not taking any money out of the country. And these guys are charging a lot of money for these people to come see these shows. These promoters are getting ruble rich. So trust me, they're not going to throw you out. They're not going to send you home. He said, "You think?" I said, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure." So he started getting more brave. I said, "When you get up at the end, just tell people what it is. Like this when we point and we talk about the light of the world, we're talking about Jesus Christ, and you can know Him.
Wow,
there is God, and you can know Him." So we had a very effective tour, and they extended the tour because it was so. I mean, in Moscow, and that ice hockey arena, that was where that picture was taken. You just showed that was 25 or 30,000 people a show.
Wow.
And we were doing matinees that were being added, and so we were touching the hearts of a lot of people. And it felt like the deal, man. It just felt like, woo, this is That's good awesome. That we're plowing into. But that outreach thing to Europe, and especially to Eastern Europe, we did a lot of it. Mark Kirschner used to go over with the Sunshine and me and Mark. Mark was in White Art. And he did a lot of work with Farrell and Farrell on the weekends. And Mark and Jane and I went into Poland, Romania, just, East Germany. And for years there, that was a regular thing for Farrell and Farrell. We would take time to go over and do outreach in Europe, just year after year during the mid-'80s.
Was that one of your top memories from all of your performances and concerts over there?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the Moscow and Leningrad shows were pinnacle stuff for Farrell and Farrell, because it was just, man, you just couldn't believe it. You could feel the earth move under your feet was what was going on with these people, and it was so delightful and so exhilarating because they were so deprived. I mean, they didn't have any churches, they didn't have any gospel, they didn't have any music to speak of, so certainly none of this pop stuff we were doing, and. So yeah, I think that tour was real pinnacle for us, and I also put Hero way up there with that too in terms of personal, not necessarily from Farrell, but just the personal thing that Eddie and I had going about Hero. We had a vision for what we were doing, and we pulled it off, and I still love it. I still listen to Hero once a week anyway, the whole work, and I love those. This extended work that I've worked on, Saviors and Oratorio that I wrote. He was just at Carnegie for the third time 3 weeks ago.
Wow. So that's a great transition. I mean, we could spend hours talking about the Farrell and Farrell years. I got all sorts of pictures and stuff. Maybe we'll save that for the next go round, but we need to kind of move forward. Can you kind of encapsulate after Farrell and Farrell what happened in your life and then what led you into that next chapter of your life as a creator?
Yeah, Jane and I it wasn't that we got bored with singing to people. It was that we felt like it was time for a change. We needed to shift gears. And we had been on the road. And so when Mom and Dad were on the road and up on stage, somebody's got your daughters at home. And maybe that's good, maybe that's not great. So we had made some sacrifices as a family in order to do that. But Jane was ready to stay home and do something different. I honestly wanted to be able to spread my wings as a writer. And I felt, when you write for a band and you're doing a record a year, then you're sitting on a bunch of great songs, right? You're not letting them out. So I knew that once I started letting songs out, I would probably get a bundle of cuts, and I did. I bet I've had over 40 Sandy Patty songs cut. Seriously.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, and one of them, and it was a tweet about, the theme was about spiritual journeying, called Le Voyage, and it's almost a platinum record now. And Sandy heard the songs and wanted to do them. So, but I had been getting a song or two on all of her records from the very, very first. The first song she cut of mine was on her first record called "There's a Savior," and good grief, that thing's in 100 hymnals now. It's just, and the first song I wrote was Greg Nelson. There was another collaborator. I wrote with a lot of people, and I wrote with two guys that started the country band Black Hawk, Dave Robbins and Van Stevenson. They were both believers, and David he was in Russia in that picture you were showing a minute ago. And David was in my band, and he co-wrote some of those techno songs. But during those same years, he and Van and I, the three of us, Van Stevenson was the other guy I was referring to, we got an Eric Clapton now starting in 84, probably in 5, right about the time of Choices album was going on. I had this other life going on as a writer, and I got an Eric Clapton cut, and I got an Anne Murray cut, and I got a Laura Branigan cut, and I got Winona cut one of my songs. And
wow.
I was getting all kinds of pop activity out of Nashville, and that was unusual. And we're with Nashville writers too, and he wasn't like, I went out to L.A. and came home with these cool songs. No, I just stayed right here in Nashville and did what I did. And I was comfortable doing it. And it's like, I even started getting some country cuts. Most of them were gospel songs that people adapted. And they put fiddle or banjo or mando or something on a pop song, and it would go the other direction. It would land in country. So I got a lot of cuts in all kinds of genres, but because I had a wide palette, Greg felt really comfortable asking me to, because he also knew that if I got impassioned on a subject, and I think Eddie did the same thing about when we did Hero, is that I'm kind of like a dog in a bone. It's like, I'm not going to quit playing with the bone and messing with the rag on the floor or whatever, until it's done, until we see it happen. So along came the Rock Arbor and Savior and Oratorio and Emmanuel, an oratorio that was toured by Ralph Carmichael and it was on Sparrow and multi-artists, all kinds of people, Point of Grace and Clay Cross and Sandy Patty and all kinds of people. One day I'd be writing country stuff, and the next day I'd be writing something pop. The next day it'd be for Christian artists, and there was a lot of Christian artists that got my songs. And so I was just having a good time all during the 90s. And for about 10 years there, it just went really, really well. And that's when Greg and I did so much writing, Nelson. And I just talked to Greg this morning. I mean, we've got a new work that we're working on that's completed. We're just looking what to do with it. But I've never known what I was doing until I stepped. How do you write a rock opera? Well, I don't know. Let's figure it out. That's kind of what Dad and I did. And we didn't take any lessons and we didn't read any books. We just did it.
Wow.
And by just doing it, sometimes you're better off because you can still bring your own gift and your own thoughts into it easier than if you go, well, I'm going to write something just like Handel's Messiah. Good luck.
Yeah. Let me ask this, just kind of in a little bit different direction, but somewhere in the future, we're all just going to be somebody's memory, right? We're going to be the memory of our children, memory of our spouse. We're just going to be a memory out there. What is it that you would like to be remembered for?
Yeah, I think, Scott, just that I was a writer, and I wrote novels and screenplays and stage plays and songs and rock operas and all manner of things, that I didn't forget the Lord. Even when I wrote a pop song, it wasn't gritty.
Yes.
It wasn't nasty. And when somebody wanted to go there in a writing session, I just said, I got to go now.
Yeah.
I just take my name off of it.
Wow.
And I would walk out the door. And because that's always a possibility with pop music, because it's not about too many different subjects, is it? And so being creative, and that's hard to do, but the palette that I created in, for the most part, was just the Word of God.
Yeah.
So what I was trying to do from the very, very first was make sure that it was high art, as good as I could make it.
Yes.
It was commercial, okay. That it was, I'm going to bore people to death.
Yep.
And I wanted the Word of God in it, sewn in to this, stitched in right into the garment. I wanted every song to be a 3-minute sermon. I wanted every piece of it to have something to say that it would be timeless enough, because the only reason you're timeless is because, in my world anyway, is because, in my view, is because you have the Word of God in it.
Yes.
It is immutable and timeless and eternal. And the Word of God is enduring. So if you have songs like Ransom and Scars and No Need that are just like Paul preaching, but you're singing from behind a Martin guitar, it's the same difference to me.
Yeah.
You can communicate something that, if you do it the right way, people will still be taking home the same message from Ransom that they did 40 years ago. And that's what happens. That's exactly what happens, is they go, oh man, that song Little Narrow Gate and Le Voyage, I love that song, man. And they weren't even born when I wrote that.
Right.
So there's something really special about, and I picked up on it really early on, that try to combine those things in the right way, and your song to still be around decades. I mean, people are going to be performing Savior long after I'm gone.
Yeah.
Jesus tarries. Seriously. Because I watched it last Sunday, Palm Sunday, at Brentwood Baptist here in Nashville. It was killer. You can go watch it on YouTube. It was absolutely stunning. And so there's joy in the room, and there's worship in the room, and there's ministry in the room, and there's anointing, and there's God's here, Emmanuel. He's with us. He's in the room. I don't know how you can do better than that, guys. And so that's the thing that winds my clock. It's not, did I get a fat check last quarter? I'll take the check, but you know what I'm saying? It is not the motivation behind it. And so if you keep your motivations as pure as you can, and do the highest art you can, and load your songs down with Jesus and his teachings and his words, I think you've got a shot at some stuff sticking around. And that's what I want people remembering me for, is that I paid attention. I kept the quality up every bit that I could. And if I thought it was going somewhere squirrely, I just walked out of the room to take my name off of it.
Well,
and that happened.
Yeah. Oh, I don't doubt it. Tell us a little bit about your book as well, if you don't mind. Where are you going with that?
I've written 2 books. The first one was written about the flood event of 2010 in Nashville, because Jane and I, we got whomped by the Nashville flood in 2010, and we had 6 feet of water in the house. And so I wrote When the Rains Fall, the one at the bottom there, and I liked it, and I had so much fun doing it. And I was convinced by a guy at Lowe's, believe it or not, a year after the flood, I built a house out here where I'm living now, out in the woods. And we've been out here for 12 years, and it's longer than that now, 13 plus. But the guy at Lowe's, when he first heard what we were going to try to do, was building a house with cash. He said, "Oh man, I don't know. Oh, y'all shouldn't do that. You're going to be divorced." I said, "Dude, we've been married for 50 plus years. What are you talking about? We're not going to get divorced over building a house." So anyway, by the end of the house building, this guy at Love said, I was wrong, but I think y'all ought to tell your story, because so many miraculous things that had to happen happened. So
Nice.
the next thing I wanted to do was, I didn't know what, but I wanted to write something else. I have written some more manuscripts. I Will Be, because I thought about going out and doing some speaking engagements. That song, I Will Be, has been cut and cut and cut. Winona cut it, and Melinda Doolittle from American Idol fame, she cut it, and Lila McCann and Michael English. I mean, this I Will Be's been cut all over the place. And it's really an inspirational song, and it's a little bit of testimonial, because, everybody kind of goes through that sucky kind of stuff in your life. And it basically says, I'm not there yet, but I'm going to be.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something about self-publishing, though. It's hard. And time consuming, and it's expensive, and it's fickle, because the audience is fickle, and you don't know what they're going to like and not like. It's like pick up sticks, throw them in the air, and find out what happens, because you just don't know. So I'm not doing as much manuscript writing as I am screenplay. And Eddie and I have finished a first draft of Hero the movie.
Wow.
We've developed the rock opera into a movie, and so we're kind of fishing right now. COVID didn't help. COVID stopped everybody's drive and forward motion, and it didn't help us. We finished the script in 2020, and so, but we're still, we basically adapted the narrative and the story from the rock opera and added some new characters, and it's pretty powerful. So I feel like something will happen with it, but everything, this, everything is what is God's timing. It's just everything is all.
Well,
all of it.
At the same time, Bob, I can say, I don't get the feeling you're going to be leaving this world slowly, my brother. I think you're going to go out with a bang, okay? Because Chris and I like to talk about finishing strong. I have this feeling that's where you're going to be finishing. You're going to be finishing strong.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you saying that, because I fully intend to do that very thing you just said. But that I don't like doing stuff. I'll be honest with you. I did a little solo record about 2008, before the flood, just because everything I'd ever done was with Jane, and I thought, I want to try a solo thing. I didn't do much with it. I've known since high school, you know what, you're a lot better with that girl right there standing right next to you.
I was going to ask, we didn't really go into this, and I'd love to have you back, but obviously there was a time in your life where she was the thing that was responsible for holding your relationship together.
The thing that Jamie was saying was the very thing that would probably, with a lot of guys, would just go, ooh, because she was very straight laced, and she didn't drink, she didn't smoke, she didn't go with those that did. And I met her in high school. She was very opinionated, and she was very beautiful. And it was like, why am I drawn to this person? Because she kind of doesn't like anything I do with my lifestyle. But that very thing is the thing that melded us, is that the opposites attracting. And it hasn't been a free for all. It hadn't been just all sunshine and roses, but it's been great, and I wouldn't trade any of it for because the thing about Jane is, she is, from the very, 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 very first of my writing career, she has been supportive.
Yeah,
completely supportive, in a way that I've seen other guys that have had mates that have just get worn out with them over that very thing of what it is they're trying to do. But Jane's always been supportive of anything that I took on, anything, whether it was rock or whatever it was. And so, but yeah, she's been the glue that's held us.
Well, when you kiss her goodnight tonight, could you tell her thank you from two guys that have enjoyed the opportunity to talk to you today? Yeah, and I gotta believe there's a whole lot of fans out there that would like to thank her as well for helping to kind of mold you a little bit along this path. So make sure she's aware of that, okay?
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. I wouldn't be able to do what I do with the freedom that I have to pursue things. And so I've never had to go, but the funny thing is, she's the first person, if I write a new song, that's the first person I run it by.
Yeah.
That picture you showed here, the most recent thing a minute ago you showed, that was the last time I got to do something with a band. And that's been 2 or 3 years, So it was a night of legends with the Archers and Evie and Farrell and Farrell. And it was fun. It was an absolute blast. So I do miss that. But and there's a quality in the music that I feel like has gotten a little bit soft in the middle. We need people to be more verbal in their faith and specified in that faith. I miss those songs that could be very situational, very oriented, so you could speak about watching too much television or doing too much of your device, and you'd write people in a box. I miss that. I don't think everything should be just, and worship music is just like in quotes now, because it's a genre that I don't necessarily takes people where they're talking about. But it used to be multi-flavored. It was Baskin Robbins, and it was you could get any flavor you wanted in Christian music. It could be all the way from Farrell and Farrell to DeGarmo Key, and I thought that was great.
Yeah.
In fact, that's what I think made it an industry.
Yeah.
And on the front end, it wasn't an industry, and then it turned into an industry, and then I feel like they've kind of gotten off in just one vein.
So as you witness this, do you still have songs popping up, or is that kind of shifted off, turned off inside of you, or do you find yourself going, I want to write a song about this stupid phone I'm dealing with, or whatever it is?
Yeah, I write it anyway. I just don't have any direction to go with it. I can't help myself writing it, and it might be about my neighbor,
Yeah.
My squirrely neighbor or something.
You need to have a blog or somewhere where we can hear these songs, because they're going to be really, really good.
I find my way, and I find a way to stay impassioned. Because if I'm not impassioned about the material, nothing happens. Even if in a single song or in a whole work, a rock opera or an oratory or whatever it is that I'm working on, I have to be completely impassioned about it, because I just lose interest otherwise so quick. But I can't, I'm still writing songs. And just not really releasing them. Because we're not as hot as we used to be, so it's hard. It's tougher to find a way to do that.
Well, Bob, it has been a pleasure. I knew it was going to be. I've been looking forward to this for some time. I hope you enjoyed it. We would love to have you back. There's so much more to these stories, and I know if you
want to do another one, we'll do another chapter and pull Jane down here. Okay?
I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah, if you want to do it again, we'll do that.
There's so much to cover. We can't thank you enough. If people want to get a hold of you, is it best to go to your website there, Farrell and Farrell?
Yeah, go to the website, .com either way, and hit the contact button, and you'll find me.
Go to Amazon and type in Bob Farrell and check that out.
They're pretty open and truthful about what I go through in my life, and I will be. It's especially that way. I kind of talk about some dark stuff in there that people have, So let's check out the books, and we'll see you next round. And I'll put my wife next to me next time.
It will improve the show 100%. Trust me. Listen, for those of you that are listening, please drop a comment to Bob. We want to pass it on to him. If you got a question or comment, maybe your favorite Farrell and Farrell song or memory, please do that. Don't forget to subscribe, pass it along. Roberto, it's great to see you. Blessings on you. Keep going. Don't ever stop. Get right or get left, buddy. Right?
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right.
Take care, my friend.
Bye, Bob.
Take care. Rock on.
Bless y'all.